Ready?
Ready.
Let's begin this workshop. I'd like to welcome all of you. Thank you for attending. I hope that you find it as interesting as I have found studying what the roles of each person at this table is, what our relationships should be with the city staff. We have with us tonight a very competent, exceptional speaker to guide us through this orientation. Kathy Sexton, and I'm going to let Sarah talk a little bit. I'm sorry, Ms. Gooding talk a little bit about Kathy since she's known her for a while, knows her well, and knows her background.
Sure. Thank you. And we will start just with a little bit. If you flip over your agenda on the back side, Kathy has been in professional public service for more than 30 years. A lot of her roles were, she came up through the ranks at Sedgwick County, working in a number of different roles, got to know many different avenues of local government there before eventually becoming the assistant county manager at Sedgwick County. From there, she became the city manager in Derby, served there for 16 years, and that's where I first got to know Kathy. I served as her assistant to the city manager, and just as a side note, I can't tell you how informative that role is to what I do every day here. So I'm deeply indebted for that. Kathy retired in 2021 from the city of Derby. She didn't stay retired very long. She got recruited to be the interim assistant city manager at the city of Wichita. Served there for about 6 months, retired again, and so this is what retirement looks like for Kathy. She is a senior management consultant for the Public Policy and Management Center at Wichita State, which I worked with her again there. So Kathy and I have had paths cross many times, and I'm grateful for that. So within her roles, Kathy has really become an expert in board management, helping councils and staff to work together to know their roles and understand their roles for smooth operations. I'm excited for what she's going to be able to share tonight in that regard, just to help all of us get off to a great start with a new mayor, a new administrator, and new council members. And we have with us this evening also 4 council candidates for a council vacancy we appreciate you being here to learn as well. And so with that, I will let Kathy fill in any details that I've missed.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for
Very
being
kind.
here.
Kathy, may I make one announcement
Please.
before we start?
Please.
We need to make it clear that this is not a business session. There'll be no business discussed and no votes or proposals made. Okay, go ahead. I'm
Very
sorry.
good. I didn't realize you were streaming, so is there a place you want me to be?
Yeah.
Or
So our camera is back here,
the station?
but you can be wherever you'd like, the podium, and I will actually be streaming your slides as well. So
Okay, you want me at the podium? Is that better?
wherever you are most comfortable.
Okay. I'll stay here then. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I'm thinking we have a lot of people here need to hear some things. And thank you all for having me so much. And thanks for coming out on this extra night. It was kind of a gloomy day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm glad the bright lights are in here and the pizza's here and you're all ready to go. I want to hopefully answer your questions. If you have questions about who does what, whatever, I'm going to try to go through some of the routine things that you might want to know, but feel free to stop me anytime. And of course, time for questions after as well. But I usually find if it's me, I forget the question by the end that I had. So if you have a question pops up, just go ahead and blurt it out. We don't want to have to wait till later. So if you want to advance slides there, we just do want to make sure we cover roles and duties, effective meetings, some tips for that, and some best practices in governance issues. There's a lot to be done, but it's also hard in the community. I grew up in a very, very small town, way smaller than Towanda. And I tell you what, good people want to help. I mean, this is so encouraging that you have not only good people on council, but lots of people willing to step forward and help. A lot of communities have a hard time recruiting people, so that speaks volumes for the community. So I definitely I've been out here once before, so I've met a few of you before, a few months ago it seems like, but we'll go ahead and advance. Some of the 3 things, I think everybody has slides. The first thing I want to tell you is I'm not going to go over everything in these slides. It's a lot, but we wanted to give it to you on paper because there's things that may not hit you tonight, but 6 months from now you may go, oh yeah, what'd she say about this or that? And if you have it with you, you're taking your notes, you've added to. So there's some of these slides that are very detailed, and we won't get into very many of those or some of those. So, but on the third slide, we do have the first three sort of roles of a governing body member: a city council member, mayor, council president. When you step forward as a volunteer for your community, you want to be working on and thinking about your strategic vision for your community, because individually you get elected and you get this title, but newsflash, you have no authority as an individual, right? It's as a body, and the whole governance thing is about community. It takes a majority, it takes three of you to have a meeting, it takes a majority of you to get anything done, and that's built in equity, fairness, valuing diverse perspectives, because it gets you to talk in public at a council meeting and then make decisions. So we're listening, we're talking, we're making decisions in public, and that is your power. That's your secret sauce. A council meeting, that's when you can do things. So, but having a strategic vision is different from, um, the day to day. You don't want to get yourselves mired in the day to day, because you do have some staff and they can figure out what needs to be done day to day, or you can trust that they can do it. You obviously are overseers of that. But as I tell people frequently when they first get elected, congratulations, but understand the easy stuff's been done. What we have left to do in public sector, it's hard. It's difficult decisions. There's never enough resources, people, money, property, facilities, vehicles. There's never enough anywhere. Doesn't matter what community you're in. So it's great when you have really, solid staff and solid community volunteers, because it's going to take everybody in this day and age. It really is. For you all, thinking about the long term, when we talk about strategic vision, I always say, think about your grandkids. Think about what decisions you're making for your kids and your grandkids, because if you make good investments at a city, then you're thinking about what's going to keep my grandkid from moving somewhere else, right? What's going to keep my kids able to live in this town, not have to move elsewhere for job, for quality of life, whatever. So strategic vision, you're also a community builder. So that's kind of a piece that's not about City Hall all the time, but it's about people elected you. You have this title now, and they look to you for leadership, and they look to you for facilitating conversations, thinking about what should we be working on. Maybe it's asking someone, when you're in the store or the restaurant, you say, well, I'm on city council. What do you think about this? I have to vote on this next week. What do you think? That person's going to remember that you asked them. You may not even know that person, but boy, that's people feel like they belong to something when someone asks that. So sometimes just the idea that you could convene a conversation about an important issue that that person may not know anything about or may not care about, but typically is going to be pleased to have been asked. Um, you can also help work through differences, because contrary to popular belief, we don't all agree on everything, and that's normal. Disagreement is normal. What's important is that you learn how to disagree, how to respect each other's positions, listen as best you can to see if there is a middle ground, for example, and then in the end, vote. Majority rules, and minority, you have to move on. You know what I mean? No one's trying to rub it in your face, but you got to move on. Celebrating accomplishments. I cannot tell you how important this is. And I'll admit, as a city manager for 16 years, I was not the best at that. It was not my strong suit, but I have learned that, I should have done more of that. And I should have realized how important that is to celebrate. And I worked with the city last year that every time their park guys did something, maybe they got a grant and fixed up something, or maybe they just with their own two hands fixed up some old playground equipment or something. They took a picture and they put it on Facebook and they told the community, we are taking care of your parks and we're doing the best we can for your kids. And that kind of thing, they may be small bits here and there, but when you celebrate those accomplishments, not only do people respect city employees more, but they understand all the many things you're doing, versus what we tend to do in public sector. We tend to get the work done, but we have to get the work done and talk about it and let people know, hey, we did this. Hey, city council decided on that last night. hey, here's the next step. We're moving on. Showing people progress and positivity, you know what I mean? It spreads, and people, they want to be a part of something positive. So never underestimate your abilities to build community, spread good vibes, because in the end, that's what community is about. Obviously, you have a role as trustee or as a steward. You know, the stewardship aspect of you have to read the packets, you have to make decisions about basic level things. And there's just like that stewardship aspect. So those top three roles on the next slide are the other three roles in general. Obviously, you're a decision maker. I've seen elected officials really struggle. I would struggle to make up your mind on certain issues, or to you feel bad being a no on certain things. But you have a duty to vote, and not voting or constantly criticizing the rest and say, I abstain. Well, you're not really doing your job. If you don't want to vote, then don't be on city council, because you need to make a choice on each and every issue, unless you have a conflict of interest, and that's when you abstain. So you are clearly a representative and an advocate for your constituents, but also for everybody else. Everybody's not your constituent. Everybody didn't vote for you, but you still serve everybody. And there's much to do in terms of listening and connecting with people. One of the things that, we have to remember that you have a small room, for example, here, probably you have a lot of meetings where nobody shows up besides you and the staff, I would guess. Sometimes you have people in the audience, and I would just say that even when no one's here, it's still a public meeting. Obviously, if you're streaming, then you get that better feeling. It's really good that you're streaming, because I've been in council meetings when nobody's there and people get really lax and they think, oh, well, we're just talking here. And it's like, no. You have to always talk and act as if, there's a newspaper reporter in the room, because it's a public meeting. And so one of the things about making sure that you respect the public, it's your meeting, but if they're here or if they're watching on TV, they hold you in regard. They want to listen to how are they making the decisions. So one thing you don't want to do is make up your mind before meetings about everything and then just vote and get out of here in a few minutes and brag about how short the meeting was. If things need to be said to help the public understand things, then go ahead and explain your vote. Or, I'm going to vote this way because I believe da da da. Oh, okay. Now we understand why she's voting no, or whatever. That can be really good. And the other thing I would say is try to avoid multitasking at meetings. Some years ago, a lot of bigger communities went to laptops or iPads for the agenda and their packets, right? Here's what happened. And I've never done it. And I've always told people why. That's a bad idea. Because you know what you'll do? Your eyes go to your screen. And you're constantly looking at the screen and scrolling and trying, what page are you on? You know what I mean? It's not the same when you have a piece of paper in front of you. So give people your full attention. If that's the public, because they're here, if they see you chit chatting with side conversations or passing notes back and forth because you're chatting with your colleague, they're going to be like, "What's going on? This seems like little kids passing notes around or something." Never mind the fact that depending on what you're saying in your notes, you can also be violating the Kansas Open Meetings Act, because you're in a meeting. If you're having conversations about agenda items, then people are thinking, why are they having these side conversations?
Personally, I feel that's disrespect.
Exactly. That's the word I was about to use. Thank you for that. It is. It's disrespectful.
It's disrespectful to them.
Yeah.
And to the other members.
And I've seen people in the
board.
public get that way. And you can watch some council meetings of big neighbors next door that I will not say the name of their cities, but they constantly look at their screens, and they've got people out there and they don't talk to them, and they don't, look at them. And so that's it. The best thing is just to and if you have your phone there, it's going to buzz during the meeting and you're going to look at it. And if you have to, like if you had a babysitter with your little toddler at home or something, you need to look at it, that's fine. But you need to put that away pretty quick, because people expect you to be, engaged for the time that you're here and professional about things. So having said that, there's also on this board, as in really a lot of boards, governing boards, maybe it's a nonprofit, but certainly government boards, there are duties or legal standards. And so that next slide that you'll see is simply the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. And those deserve some explanation because we're not all going to be on the same page about what those mean. But duty of care is that you act in good faith. When you make a decision as a council member, you say yes or no, that you have tried to inform yourself of all sides of the issue. You've tried to do the best you can. That duty of care is that you're going to make the best decisions that you possibly can. And then loyalty, that you may not always win on every issue, but you have a duty not to go out there and lambast the rest of the council. Well, yeah, the council voted on that, but I was a no. And that's just stupid, and I'm not going to have it. Really? Because the next issue might be your colleague voted no, and he's going to then blast you. So better to just say the city council in a majority vote says we're doing this, this is what we're doing. It's okay to say, well, I really wasn't in the majority on that one, but you know, the people who voted that way want the best for the city, and I understand I was the more minority, so I'm moving on. Obedience. When you have a mission, a goal you want to work on, a budget you've approved, you have a duty to say, yes, this is what we're doing. We're complying with this. It might be a state law that none of us like, right? But if it says the city has to do something, you have to do it. Either that or decide you're going to fight it in court or something, but you can't just not, you can't say, well, we're not going to do that. Just doesn't work that way. On the next few slides, they're examples of what I'm not going to go over every little thing, but duty of care on the next slide certainly talks about a little more details on that. What does that mean to make good faith decisions? Well, that you're informing yourself, you have an independent vote, you use your own judgment. You don't say, hey, how should I vote on this? Well, I'll vote with you, Mayor, whatever. Make up your own mind. More details on the next two slides on the other duties. When it comes to loyalty, you do want to make sure that if you think you have a conflict of interest on something, that you talk that through. You think about that, look in your governing body handbook and make sure, do I have a conflict of interest? Talk to your attorney, talk to Sarah, make sure you know that, hey, do I need to state my conflict in public and say, I'm not going to vote on this because my sister's the owner of the business we're about to do business with, or you might just say, what's the deal? Not everything is a legal conflict. If your attorney were here, you would be told, oh, the state law about what a conflict is very narrow, and it's only if you have a financial interest. I'm here to tell you it's okay to think a little broader in that, hey, I feel bad. I wouldn't want my neighbors thinking that I'm voting for something for my sister to get business on. So I'm just going to say, look, that's my sister. If it's okay if I don't vote now, if your vote is needed to get the deal done because half the council's absent that day or something, you don't have to abstain. You could say, normally I would abstain because my sister, but legally I don't really have a conflict. I've talked to the city attorney. I don't financially benefit, therefore I don't have a conflict. So if I have to vote, I will, but that kind of thing, that you just tell people that. So obedience is making sure that that you guys are awesome. You have regulatory documents. You have a code, a city code, you have ordinances, you have this governing body handbook to try to explain some of those. And I think that it's great to get familiar with that and making sure that you just know what you are obligated to do per those documents, state laws, et cetera. The next slide just talks about a little bit that the leadership aspect, because some of what you do is like approving things, financial oversight, hiring staff and overseeing them. But as leadership, governance has these three basic pieces: fiduciary, strategic, and generative. And it kind of gets to everything I've been saying, that you oversee things and you're a steward, but then you also have to constantly be looking out and thinking strategically and not just thinking about, well, Mary Sue down at the cafe is complaining about this, so I want this fixed now. Really? Okay, I mean, okay, thanks, put it on the list, but really your job is much bigger than that. You got to be looking further out and thinking about what are the key questions that could really help the community moving forward. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about your roles as individuals as opposed to the actual board. So as individuals, a few slides in here about being prepared for meetings, be ready to serve in a leadership position. Sometimes your role is to build the bench, that it's not about you, it's about who's next. So like, I serve my time on city council, but I know I probably need to be done at the next term or whatever. So let me start thinking at the beginning of my term, who might I recruit to replace me? Obviously, you don't have that problem here tonight, that people are willing to step forward, but a lot of communities, I had someone, just recently in one of these briefings say, when I'm done, I don't know what they're gonna do. And I just looked at him and said, well, you've been on council for like 20 years. Who have you recruited to take your place? Who have you been mentoring and saying, you too can do this? I'm not so special that I can't be replaced, right? Additional roles on the next slide. You can take a look at those. You want to ask timely questions, but you also don't want to take too much of the staff's time wanting all kinds of question answers and data and reports, et cetera, because you don't have that many staff. They don't have that many hours. Sometimes you have to make decisions with less than perfect information. And so you want to be mindful of overdoing some of the expectations there. Certainly, if you have executive sessions, they're because that's the time when you have a closed meeting, when the camera's turned off, there's no minutes taken, and nobody gets to report on those topics. Now, you don't make any decisions during an executive session, but there's only a few topics that state law allows you to do in a closed session like that. And there's a reason for that. If you're trying to buy a piece of property or hire a person, or you've got business secrets, or you don't want everybody in town knowing exactly which piece of property or how much you're offering or talking about offering. There are reasons why, public reasons why the public is best served if you talk about things in private first, sometimes, occasionally. So you want to be careful to be real clear, don't repeat that. I had a council member once that the day after an executive session, what we talked about, I got someone asked me about some person, not a council member, right? And I was like, how did this person know about this? What's going on? Well, I had a council member who thought, well, I only told my wife. He said this to me. I only told my wife. He literally did not think there was anything wrong with telling his wife, because he said, we talk about everything. And I said, well, I get that, but this is confidential. Did you tell her this was confidential? Did she know that? Well, she repeated it to somebody because she didn't know it was confidential. She just thought it was another one of their chit chats about council business. Well, no, it was the secret part, because it was talked about in executive session. And so she unknowingly spread something around town that harmed the city. But it was that piece about, well, of course, I mean, I'm right there. I talk to my husband about a lot of things, but we're very clear about, this is my work and this is your work. We do not talk about our clients or that kind of thing. So it's important that you keep things separate like that. Now, roles of individual council members. Next slide. Thank you very much, Sarah. I think we've talked about several of these so far. Any questions on any of these roles of council members that we've covered in the last couple slides? The one on here that we haven't maybe talked about yet is, it's important when people say, maybe you observe a problem in town, or someone says to you, hey, mayor, what's the deal with this? It's important that you take those concerns to your city administrator, that you relay those, and also important that you relay compliments. When someone, especially, I mean, for yourself, if you've noticed something, but even when someone says to you, oh, thanks for fixing that street. Hey, I noticed this. It's really helpful for the staff to get that kind of feedback, because there are days when it's a thankless job in City Hall. So when you can get positive feedback and celebrate a little, that's a good thing.
And I will always pass this forward to the right
Yes.
staff too.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. When someone texts you something or emails or whatever, just forward that over. I mean, it's that simple, because then sometimes I've been known to print out an email and stick it up on the wall, and it just makes people's day when they realize that someone noticed something that they had done that day, and it really does help. So the next few slides are about financial oversight, and these are some. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it's kind of a laundry list of questions to ask, things to look for. These are great slides to look back on later. I think this information can be for council, but also for staff. Is sometimes, we need all the detail of financial to work out, but once you get the details to balance out, you also need to summarize, right? You need to make it in consumable format. You need to make a pie chart. You need to make a picture, a summary table instead of a 3 pages long spreadsheet. This is very important because people need to understand what's going on. You can't just always assume someone else has the finances figured out. So your duties there are to, talk about not just the money balancing, but the implications. If you say, we're going to do this, well, do you know how much it costs before you promise people you were going to do that? Have you talked about not only how much it costs, but where that money's coming from? And so we don't get overextended, for example. Yes, we'd love to do that project. That would be nice. We'll apply for a grant and see if we can get that, or we ask for donations to match our grant, whatever. A lot of times we just don't have the money to do everything. So we also have need for internal controls, audit questions. Audits do audits, but also ask the auditors questions. Financial oversight in the next slide, that once you get a grant, you have to be very mindful, or even before you accept the grant, mindful of what are the requirements for this grant. Because I'll be honest, I got a grant one time to help with the senior center updating in Derby years ago. And come to find out that federal money had so many strings attached. I told him, I said, council, I got to be honest with you. As much as they made us spend on all this administrative oversight and record keeping and do it this way and put up a sign out front, we're doing this and that, all this silliness, I said, I would never apply for this grant again. It's caused so much staff time that we could have done the remodel so much cheaper. So sometimes that happens. And so I always tell people, take a look at what the requirements are before you accept somebody else's money. Cash flow is something I'm sure Sarah's figuring out as she figures
Deep in
out
the middle of
budget.
it.
Yeah, exactly. When you step into a new job, obviously if there was a way it was being done before, but it's not always intuitive. If you got to dig into the records and the detail and figure out how do we make this work on a day to day as well as a month to month. And when it comes down to it, you got to make payroll. You got to pay the light bill. So getting into those details is very important. But for you all, sometimes, you might want to ask for things and I don't know what you're used to getting, so I'm not trying to imply you haven't been getting this, but it's one thing to get monthlies, but you need to see, how does this compare to the budget? How does it compare to year to date last year compared to this year? Give yourself some things to compare against. Certain things you get might say, well, how are other cities handling this, right? It's all information, and you're probably not dealing with too much that somebody else hasn't dealt with as well. And on the next slide, I just wanted to emphasize the need to communicate financial information well. I think it's probably apropos that we're here tonight after sales tax elections in some of our neighboring communities. Hutchison's passed yesterday, Wichita's did not. And when I personally was one of those sort of government geeks where I'm watching both of those and how they portrayed both and why they were asking their citizens for that tax and what they were doing with it and how they talked about it. So communicating financial information is huge, makes a huge difference in terms of people feeling like whether they can trust you or whether you have been squandering their money before, or why didn't you tell us we were in this financial mess? Or you're telling us now because you want us to vote for something, but why haven't you been telling us this for the past couple of years or whatever? So communication is very important. And anytime you can do, I guess, not quantity of a bunch of data that then people just kind of look at and go, I don't know what all this means, but the quality of key data that you can say, okay, here's what's important, is very useful. And looking at things in that big picture, the image here quarterly instead of, for example, the details of month to month. Oh, here's how much we spent last month. Well, what does that mean to me? So jumping then into effective meetings, some best practices on effective meetings, and you guys are probably doing some of these now. Certainly the transparency aspect of not only should do, but state law is, open meetings, you should have an agenda. You should give notice of your meeting in advance. I mean, you guys have a website where you put out there, here's the day we have our meetings. I saw your agendas, you're trying to tell people, here's how a meeting works and here's what we do and don't do. And your manual's very good about saying, we have public forum at a certain time in the meeting and everybody gets the same amount of time. You'd be surprised how many cities, school boards, county commissions are not consistent with that. They'll let one person stand there and talk for 10 minutes and somebody else, they're like, okay, time's up. You have to be even handed with people. Everybody gets the same amount of time. I spoke at a city last month and yeah, we don't keep time. I said, your book, your thing says you give 5 minutes. Well, yeah, well, okay, but we don't really do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, it's never been a problem because not too many people want to talk. Really? Until when? Until it is a problem, right? So they had a controversial issue and people talked. And sure enough, the mayor was running things. God bless him. He didn't have a timekeeper. And he thought, well, haven't you talked enough? And then somebody else got way more time. And sure enough, that's what was in the story in the newspaper. It was one person on one side was given way more time than the other person on the other side of the issue. And I'm like, right, get a timekeeper, get a clock, get a little card or something that tells people. One city clerk told me she has like a kitchen timer, and she just lets it go off. She doesn't hit the thing. She just lets it go off till the person stops speaking. I said, well, there's one way. I mean, sometimes we have a little electronic device. Sometimes if you're speaking, you're not even hearing that. So I tell people, and it is better to do a visual and an audio. I've had a deal where like, okay, you've got a little green card, yellow card, red card. And mayor, you would just tell them when they start, you're going to get your 3 minutes. And when there's 30 seconds left, Sarah right here, it's got a yellow card. Sarah, show us your yellow card. And she's waving it. So then the person says, oh, okay, I know where you're talking about. Because when you don't point that out, a lot of times people don't know there's a timekeeper. They don't realize it's being kept. And if you don't have a card, and then you hold up the red one, obviously, when they're out of time, wave it a little bit, get their attention. If you don't do that physically, I mean, you don't know how good everyone's hearing is. Some people aren't going to hear you say. And also, it's really hard to interrupt someone when they're speaking mid-sentence. It's really hard for the mayor, for the timekeeper, anybody, just to say, I'm sorry, sir, you're out of time. I'm sorry, sir. You need to, it's just hard. So a little wave, I just think is a best practice. And I think it doesn't matter till it matters. And then people feel like, okay, why was I treated unfairly? So for you all, you have 6 members, you have 3-person quorum. When 3 people get here, you can have a meeting. If 3 of you are talking about something, a subject like a council business, outside of the meeting, then actually you're having a meeting. And it's because 3 people are talking, right? I mean, I'm sure you've been told that's, you can't, 2 of you can talk about an issue, but you can't bring in a 3rd one. Is that right? That's what you've been told. So the difficult part there is also what they call serial meetings that, okay, mayor talked to Jennifer, you guys talked about something, next thing you know, Jennifer's talking to Kid about the same subject, all of a sudden 3 people are talking. Not at the same time, not in the same, but it's serial. It's like you were texting. Well, I texted him and then I texted, or I called this person and I saw this person on, at the store and I saw this person after the meeting. If you're talking to 2 other of your colleagues about a subject, then you're having an illegal meeting. And so it can be texting, it can be emailing, and that's why I'm sure you've been told don't ever reply all to, and sometimes a city administrator, when they have information to send you, they might just put everybody blind copy. Because when you put everybody blind, you can't hit reply all. I mean, you can hit reply all, but it just go to Sarah. So it's kind of a built-in. I know some of us have a hard time remembering, to do that. So
Can I ask a question,
please
Kathy?
do.
There's been discussion over the past few years during my time on the council that 2 council members cannot talk together. Only two council
Oh.
members can talk
Only
together,
two.
but the mayor doesn't count.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know. I'm asking your opinion.
yeah,
The mayor doesn't have a vote under our form of government.
okay,
Unless there's an even number of us, it
Right.
would be split.
yeah. Has your attorney weighed in on that?
Not
That-
yet,
that-
so that's a good.
That,
Okay.
that was,
Because honestly,
discussion a couple
that's
years
the
ago.
thing. You could say strictly speaking, the mayor doesn't count. And I would say, yeah, strictly speaking, that is the rule. But what happens if you end up vetoing something? Or something's a tie and then you're voting on that issue because you're
Right.
bringing the tie. Well, you were talking to somebody about it.
right.
So then you
That's
kind of,
my
you
question.
kind of backed into a violation.
Yeah.
You didn't mean to, but
But you did.
if you constantly get in that situation where you're always pushing the limit of saying, yes, two of us will talk, but we'll loop in the mayor, well, you're just running that risk that, well, you could vote on that.
Yeah.
And probably you have maybe some votes on some zoning things that are a little different.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
The mayor votes maybe on some, and maybe
Ordinances, I believe the mayor votes on some.
all ordinances, maybe charter.
Charter ordinances
Yeah.
only, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I don't have all that memorized for you, but maybe you all vote on like hiring the city administrator.
Correct. No,
No, you don't. You don't vote on that either. Okay. Okay. Huh. Yeah, it's every city's different is the thing. You know, we've all made
I
our,
think we just need to get some
Ordinances are
clarification from
fine.
Rob.
yeah.
So what you're saying is if I see Kid at the grocery store or the jump start and him and I start talking about an issue, 2 days later I see Jenny and her and I start talking about the same issue, that's illegal?
Now,
How if I'm not talking, if he's not present and we're both on the council and we're talking about an issue that is a council issue?
Yeah.
So once I've talked to one person on the council, I can't talk to another
you
one
need to
about it?
do it in the meeting, so it's public. So just, I mean, it may be, some of it may be very innocent, but on the other hand, let me just play a scenario for you. Okay, Kid, hey, did you see what's on the agenda next week? You know, I'm gonna vote no on that. That's craziness. Where are you at on that? Okay, now you know how each other, that's all fine, because it's just two of you. Do the same thing. Hey, Jenny, what's going on with this issue? I can't believe you're voting this on this. Now, why don't you, I mean, and Kit and I are gonna do, you know. So what you're doing is you're trying to get a third person, which is quorum, and even though they're not in the same space at the same time, the attorneys tell us that's a serial meeting because you're clearly trying to get to a decision, or you're trying to sway someone into changing their mind, that kind of thing. So I'm not getting into all the legal details, but
yeah.
that's generally, if you just want to stay out of trouble on that, you just want to make sure that if you've talked to one person about that issue, you don't talk to another. I tell you what, the other good thing about like detailed agenda reports and packets is that you can prepare for a meeting by sitting down and reading that packet. That way you can see, okay, because a good city administrator is going to give you the facts on the agenda report, not just tell one side of the issue, but kind of say, here's the good, bad, and the ugly of this issue. That way it helps you think through it. But what it also allows you to do is bring your questions and your thoughts to the meeting and have that conversation in the meetings where people can say, okay, Drew's asking about this, or, you know, Chris made a good point on that, and you're all hearing it all at the same time, because you might be able to sway someone else's, you know, view on something by making your argument in the meeting. But when you do that on the sidewalk or at the store, they're watching the ball game, I think for the public perception is, okay, they're having backroom conversations. Why aren't they talking about these in the meeting? And tell me the why, and, you know, duke it out a little bit in a civil manner, but people respect that because they see that you're having, you know, adult conversations about difficult issues.
I think the transparency issue is.
Yeah,
is the
it's more
biggest one.
transparent. They see you're a real human being. You don't have all the answers, but you're gonna say, well, I was reading this and I was wondering about this, and I don't think I ought to vote on this. Is anybody gonna convince me I should vote yes on this? You know, have that in the meeting so people can see it's a difficult issue, you're struggling with it, you wanna talk it through.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Other tips for engaging at meetings, arriving early, socializing. It's not like you can't talk to each other at all. You know, how are your kids? What's the ball game like? It should be the talk outside of the actual meeting with each other should be about non-council business, not things you're about to vote on that night. But socializing with each other is a good thing, and certainly with the public. If people take the time to come here, you want to get to meet them or see what's on their mind or why they came, that kind of thing. Anytime, this probably doesn't affect you guys as much as I've seen it affect bigger councils. Some cities have 9 members, 8 council and a mayor. And I think it's really hard for them to know that, hey, if you're running late or if you're feeling sick and can't come that night, you need to tell the mayor or tell the city administrator in advance of the meeting, because they might be counting on you for quorum. And so you guys know this because you're a smaller body. The bigger groups, sometimes it's like you think, why aren't they telling me in advance if they're not going to be here? So it really is important, because you honestly can't proceed if you don't have 3, and you don't want to sit here waiting if someone's not coming at all. So other tips for engaging are really, you're not always going to get your way. So once you've said your piece and everyone said their piece, you can't keep saying, I had a council member once who he would repeat himself. He just kept hitting that button. I want to talk. And then he'd say the same thing he had just said. He just couldn't let go of issues. And his colleagues were getting very frustrated because he would make the meetings last forever. And it's just like, you're not going to sway people's opinion. Just stop repeating yourself over and over. But it's also important to just get sort of the gumption to, I mean, it is a comfort level, but to make the motions. You know, sometimes, I don't know what you do here, but sometimes the city administrator will write a recommended motion on your agenda just to help you get it out of your mouth and articulate it, faster and move the meeting along. If it's written out there and someone, here's the motion, so moved. You don't have to repeat it every time. If someone just said it, just say, so moved, second it, moving on.
Kathy, if I could speak to that, my first couple months have been a scramble, but I am for our March meeting next week trying to prepare agenda reports with full analysis, with a recommended motion, which you all are not obligated to, but it creates, if you want to proceed as recommended, that motion is there. You can also amend and make it an entirely different motion. So we are working toward that standard as I get my feet under me.
Yeah, recommended motion, and sometimes another way I've seen it happen in some cities is options. And that may not be on every, agenda item, but some particularly hairy issues. They just want to see staff say, okay, you could either approve this, or you could approve sort of this middle ground, or you could, in planning and zoning items, that you could either approve what the planning commission gave you or send it back to the planning commission or ask them to look at something different. I mean, so it's good. Sometimes some issues you might just want to say, well, what do you see as the options? And then the staff report might say, okay, here's the pros and cons of each of these, options of what you could do on the issue. So additional tips for engaging. It is important to know that everybody's going to come to this meeting with a presumption of goodwill. People have ideas. They may be great ideas. They may be okay ideas, but they all have value, right? And your job is to listen and to, assess in your own mind. Well, have you thought of this? And, oh, no, I really didn't think of that. It really is an iterative process, but to respect everybody and to honestly get better in your thinking by having the conversations, the feedback loop of understanding how you think differently as you listen to other people. There is, of course, some need for parliamentary procedure to get through a public meeting. You don't have to get into the depths and details of Robert's rules per se, but basics are important. That, one subject at a time, one person at a time. Just because you've been on council a long time and someone else is new doesn't mean your idea is better or you don't have equal standing to speak. But you do have to have a second for every motion. And if you make a motion and no one seconds it, sorry, you can't keep talking. You gotta let it go. It's one of those things. So, and so public comment is always a part of the agenda that I find has questions and people want to talk about a little more. I think it's really a good best practice to welcome people, inform them of their roles. Some councils in some cities let people talk on every agenda item. I don't think that's the best practice. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that what you do is a great idea. You have a public forum or what you call public comment time it's a piece on your agenda. This is when you talk. I think it's important, as we talked about, to enforce that equally to everybody. You might have a sign-in sheet at the door so that you know who the people are, and you know how to spell their name, and for the minutes, things like that, if they sign in, not signature, but sign in a legible way. Another best practice is we don't have people say their address anymore in the minutes, or if they say it out loud, don't put it in the minutes because of privacy and putting minutes on the internet and just the AI tools that are out there to scrape data off of. You just don't want to put people's personal information out there, but it's good for you all to know sometimes, does this person live in our city? So it is good if they say, yeah, I live here and I've lived here a long time or whatever, but they don't have to say their actual address. But the hardest part about public comment time is when people come in and say, well, I have questions for you people, and I want answers, and they'll just stand there and wait for you to answer their question, right? Sometimes that happens. And I would just say it's important to try to describe, hey, this is your time when they ask you that. Sometimes, Mayor, I've heard mayors say, this is your time for you to talk to us. We're not here to debate an issue with you. And if you have a technical question that we need to look up, like why did my water bill have this on it, or how come that happened with my street or whatever, those are things that we're not really equipped to like give you an answer in this meeting, but we want to help you after the meeting. We'll get your contact information to the staff and we'll talk to you afterward, that kind of thing. But you don't want to debate with folks. And sometimes you think, oh, it's easy, I'll just answer his question. Oh, it can be a real trap, and you've seen this happen. Sometimes you answer the question, well, then there's 3 more questions. So best to hear them out and take the notes of what do they need to know or want to know and get that back later. You just don't want to have. And I say this with all due respect to folks. Some folks think that the only way to address you is at the podium at your meeting. What you want is to have multiple channels of communication for people to talk to you. So either you give out your email address to folks or your phone number to folks, and it's okay to talk to my council member, or, people are to call City Hall. A lot of things the staff can do, and folks don't really need to talk to an individual council member. Some folks think that you get paid or this is your job, especially I've seen that with the mayor. They call up City Hall during the middle of the day. I want to talk to the mayor. Well, are you aware that's not a paid position? He's not like here. What do you need? Oh, well, my water bill. Well, oh, well, I can help you with your water bill. You know what I mean? So we always train staff to try to help get through those phone calls where people think they need to talk to the person on the top of the org chart, as opposed to other folks can help you out. So as far as additional on the next slide, best practices for public comment. So the reason I say you don't want to do it on every agenda item, I don't think you all do, at least your documents don't indicate you do. I say this with all sincerity. There have been a lot of examples in the last few years, especially starting in COVID and post-COVID times, where folks are angry and folks are, life is difficult for a lot of people. And so sometimes they take that out on coming to a city council meeting or a city hall during the day, perhaps, and yelling at staff or whatever. So we've had, a lot of difficult times for folks and good examples of things not to do. So, but in this regard, I would say when you allow people to talk on every agenda item, it lengthens your meeting tremendously. It gets away from, this is your meeting. You were elected for a reason. Remember I told you the very first thing when I just first started out, you do not have individual power as a council member. Your power is what? Here in this meeting, talking with each other. This is literally your meeting. You don't have to have public comment time, even at every meeting. You certainly don't have to allow the public to speak on every agenda item. And if you did, your meetings would last hours longer than they do. And that's what's going on in communities. I could name you cities across the state that have recently changed. So we're going to let everybody talk. Well, it turns out to be the same 3 guys every meeting on every agenda item. And sometimes they don't really have anything helpful to say about the agenda item. They haven't even read the packet. They don't even know anything about the item you're talking about. They just sort of want to be you. They want to have a say in the decision. And it's like, well, you weren't elected to make this decision. We are. So take that duty and execute that duty as opposed to thinking that your job is to listen to everybody. You can listen to people, but they can email you or they can call you offline. But when it comes to the meeting, you have an agenda and you're going to have a lot of things to get done and you can't stay here all night. I literally know people who, Kansans, who have worked for local government who quit their job and went to another community because they had a night meeting, and every other week when they met, the meetings got done at midnight or 1 a.m. And they're starting at a similar time as you guys were starting. And they were hours and hours of meetings. And as a staff, she's like, I've got little kids. I cannot stay out this late every time. It just doesn't work. And obviously there are elected officials who get burned out when you have that kind of thing, because again, it's not your job. It's your vocation. It's your passion position, but you have a job and you have family and you can't stay here all night every time. So some tips then for conducting effective meetings. You've got your stuff to do before the meeting can make the meeting so much more effective. When you have procedures and you understand them and you follow them, when you make them available to the public, I don't know if that document's on the website or not.
I'll have to check.
Yeah, you might think about it. Well, adopting a governing body handbook and code of meeting procedures is huge. It's really helpful for people who are thinking about running for council so that they read and know what they're in for before they run. And so they understand whose job is what. And it's the best way to orient people to the role. But when you make it available to the public, people get a better sense of, oh, okay, well, I didn't know how City Hall worked. And now I understand it better because I can just look in here and, oh, here's what the mayor does. And here's what the council president, what does that mean? What does she do? During the meeting, you greet people, you explain, you're kind. I've seen a mayor who is very business oriented and just goes through, you get the job done, but I've also seen a mayor who's really kind to people. And I noticed that difference. And when we had a transition of mayor, I was like, he's just so nice. He makes people feel like he's glad they're there and that they come back and that kind of thing. And I just realized, that means a lot. I've seen some council meetings where I didn't have this practice. I learned this in the last year. They put their business cards, maybe it's a city administrator business card by the door or somewhere where folks who visit can easily get to it. So, and they tell them, you see those business cards back there? Pick one up and call Sarah tomorrow, that kind of thing. Instead of making Sarah get up and walk around and kind of interrupt the meeting to get that to them. And I thought that was a pretty neat idea. I hadn't seen it before. So I think after the meeting, the role is it's okay to chat, debrief, power down, whether that's with each other, with staff, but obviously you're not rehashing the agenda items, but you're being cordial, you're building the relationship and following up with anything that you had said in the meeting that you wanted to follow up on. That's very important. How are you all doing? We're almost an hour. I can wrap up really quickly. I also have a 7-minute video to show you if you'd like to see it, if we have time. We have a few more slides to go, but any questions at this point? Any thoughts? Any concerns?
Not yet.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, this next section is really about collaborative government, and it's about the part about who does what and what's our form of government. So this slide where we talk about some roles. So council, city administrator here, it's used the term as manager in the little picture because the video is on this slide, and it's just that talks about the council manager form. And I think we'll go ahead and show it. Sarah, if we can do that.
I think I have it queued up.
Okay. I think it like I say, it's 7 minutes, so it's a few minutes to sit through, but I think what you'll see is an appreciation for how communities are all different in the way they've set up their government. But generally speaking, it helps you understand a little better about some benefits of having a professional staff person on the city administrator role when you all are at your day jobs and you all as the policymakers.
Which form of government?
Well, thank you for indulging on that. Obviously, that's an organization that is trying to help people understand different forms of government. I will tell you my story. In Derby, we have a summer pool, right? Rock River Rapids Regional Aquatic Park, actually, and employed a lot of young people to be lifeguards and work at the gate and that kind of thing. I had a time years ago, certainly no one who's still on council, but one of the council members he had a question or something he didn't think was happening right at the pool. And so he just goes out to the pool and starts talking to these young people who are um, running the place. And of course, the city contract with the rec commission and they hired the young people to run the place. And councilman didn't have a badge on or anything, just I'm a new councilman and I'm here to, and those young people are like, who is this old guy and why is he talking? What? I mean, so they talked to their boss and before you know it, I got a call saying, why is your council member over here at the pool telling these 16-year-olds how to do their job or whatever? Well, he meant well. He just literally did not understand that kind of day-to-day supervision. Remember the first thing I told you? You do not have individual power
Yep.
or authority. And so he was literally way off base in what he was doing, not even talking to a city employee, talking to a contracted, rec commission employee and a youngster, a minor, a juvenile who was like, who is this guy? Why is he telling me what, so the notion that that gentleman thought that, hey, I should do something about this, but he hadn't seen the video. He literally did not understand that if you have a question about a city service and how we're providing it, you talk to the city manager. And then I will explore that, find out the other side of the story, fix the problem, whatever it is. But you can't just sort of show up and say, I'm in charge here. So I thought that video was helpful for that because when you're new, when you're thinking about doing this, you do kind of wonder, well, what is my level of responsibility? I mean, do I siphon things to the mayor or how do I do this? So I think on the next slide, just point out the relationship with your administrator. Obviously, you guys just hired Sarah, so you're all figuring this out together. But essentially, we do have, actually go on to the next one, if you would, Sarah. I think this one was pretty well covered in the video. It was kind of my slide if we don't show the video. So this one, I think, just gives you a little bit of your duty is to oversee obviously your first duty is to hire someone good to be a city administrator. And then it's to give them their marching orders. I set you up for that one, didn't I? And then it is to, have that professional respect. I mean, if there's something on your mind, tell her, hey, I heard this. What's the deal with that? Or shouldn't you be doing this? Shouldn't you be doing that? I mean, have adult conversations. You don't want to have those behind her back thinking that you're going to offend her. If you have a concern or a question, she's going to be best if you just ask her. And she's like, I don't know, maybe I'm supposed to do that. Let me find out. There's nothing infallible about this position. We make mistakes all the time. Um, sometimes when you have these conversations and together, you can read the research she's done on the topic. When she gives you an agenda report, then you can have these conversations. And it's just so helpful because it's all iterative and we're all learning all the time. But she does need you to do that annual assessment, which is a very frank conversation about, and obviously if you have something to say about performance, you don't want to wait for an annual assessment either. It should be, really conversations throughout the year, but you definitely want to have that. And so many times when I get a call from a city administrator who's kind of upset or feeling like, hey, I don't think my council likes me anymore or whatever, I first say, well, where are you with your annual evaluation? Oh, they never do it. What do you mean they never do it? I always try to come back on the city administrator. So heads up, Sarah. It's your job as a city administrator to put that in front of council and make sure, hey, it's time to do the evaluation. And you have a process for doing that, whether it's individual evaluations or put all together. And usually there's an executive session where you have a conversation about things. And some of that is praise for the good. And some of that is, this could be better, or let's agree on the goals so that we're not disappointed next year because we've all agreed this is what we're going to work on this year. So, but there's a lot to be said for individual communication, and you just have to tell Sarah, like, you guys have probably figured this out already, but I had one council member that I knew if I wanted to talk to him, doing his job, he drove all over the state. I could call him about 6:45 in the morning and catch him when he was driving in, and he could give me this amount of time until he got to his place, right? I had a councilman who worked in construction, and I knew if it was a nice day out, don't call him because he's busy. But if it's raining, boy, I'm gonna say, hey, can you have it all to nurture that relationship and be frank and candid with each other about what you need in terms of communication and the relationship itself. On the next slide, you'll see that the city administrator really should be sharing good news and bad news with all of you, not keeping one of you informed and not telling the rest of you about something. And that's hard because if you have a one-on-one conversation, you have to sit there and make a note to say, okay, I got to remember to tell everybody else this too. And maybe some things are going to come in email, like say the council agenda packet or something, because you want to make sure everybody's hearing the same thing. And you may think, well, this isn't very personal. I had a council member once who just wanted to have a phone call all the time. He didn't understand. I said, I have 9 of you. Do you think I have time to make 9 phone calls? The one phone call I had with you took 20 minutes. So that's my whole day. So if I can shoot you an email telling you the facts, and then you follow up with that phone call or that text if you want more or have a question or whatever. But I usually found it pretty easy to just get out all the facts in a very short email. So obviously you don't want to have a book written as an email these days. I mean, you want to keep it very short. Hey, this is going on. I'm on top of it. Let me know if you have questions or something. So yeah, the periodic updates, there's different ways of doing them. I don't know what you all are used to here, but some city administrators do what they call a Friday memo. Like once a week, you're giving a memo out to the council saying, I say a memo, old language, but an email that says, here's 3 things that happened this week, or here's the most important thing I'm working on next week, or, just little bullets of what's going on. For you then, you want to defer to the administrator and the mayor on when it comes to developing agendas. If you have an agenda item that you want to talk about, you go to the mayor, you go to Sarah and say, can we put this on the agenda sometime? Because I really want to talk about this issue. I think a lot of times they'll accommodate that. But if, sometimes you have a kind of a dog with a bone deal that, that if they know that, hey, we already voted on this once, we're not gonna keep bringing it up again. I mean, if there's gonna be reasons, they'll tell you no, if there's real reasons for that. But if she's trying to get a hold of you, it's probably because something, she needs to talk to you. I mean, something's going on. So make sure you're telling her, hey, I can talk at lunchtime, or I can talk at here's when I can talk, or here's how I do best on this kind of communication, because everybody's different, everybody's busy. Micromanaging is something that it's like, what does that mean, and how do we know we're doing it? Well, you don't want to get in the middle of personnel matters in terms of who to hire or what needs done. Obviously, you want to talk to the manager when you have issues, but it shouldn't be in the sense of you need to do this. Because if I'm the manager, I'm going to say, well, you're one of 6, and remember, we need to talk about this. I mean, if it's something that we don't agree with. Now, there's other times you might have an idea, and Sarah may say, well, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that. I'm going to do that. But it's not because you're a council member and you can tell her what to do on everything. It's more because it was a good idea. And again, we want to be iterative and we want to learn from each other. Any questions on kind of that, who does what and the administrator's role, your role, etc.? We'll jump right into the last couple slides, and that's your legacy. I think it's always important for an elected official or someone appointed to fill a role is, what am I doing this for? And legacy should not be a word that you think of as presumptuous if I would have a legacy, but more like, this is my time. My time is valuable, right? So what do I want to get out of this? Why did I run? And literally, if you look at it and say, by the time my term is over, I want to accomplish what? Or what are we here for? Because if you know some people know what that is. Some people run because they have a beef with City Hall. And here's my beef. Here's the thing. I've seen people like a dog with a bone work on that one issue, and once they get it done, then sometimes they quit. To be real honest, because they had one reason they wanted on City Hall, and they didn't want to deal with all the rest of this stuff. They really didn't realize how hard of a job it was, how many hard decisions they have to make. So literally, some people just say, this was the thing I wanted, and I got it done, and so I'm done now. Most people obviously are not like that. Most people just want to do right by their community. They want to, what can we do to make this a growing and thriving community and make it better? And so, but I want to say too, you want to preserve your legacy because you're going to do a lot of good while you're here. So you want to be careful not to screw something up, and that's your legacy, right? So when you do something like, well, I'll just borrow this mower because, and you're borrowing city property, don't do that. Just don't, because that one poor decision will tarnish your legacy of all the good things you did when you were here. You never want to give a member of the public, especially a family member or a friend of yours, any impression they're getting special treatment, that you're willing to give them special treatment, or that they should, ask me if you ever need anything, because the closer that person is to you, the more it's going to look like to everybody else that your legacy is one of favors and unequal treatment, that you want to be sure that you're treating every person in town the same way. And I'll never forget a day when I was a city manager, my public works director, somebody had wanted something done and called, and then the mayor called and, oh, you need to do this. So I called it public works, and I was like, Robert, what do you think about this? I mean, how hard would this be? Should we do this? I mean, we're getting all this pressure. And so, Kelly, here's the way I look at it. Are we willing to do that for every single person in town? Okay. He put me in my place. I was caving to the pressure of someone who was just angry and wanted something done. To the reality is, can we afford to do that for everybody? I mean, I have no idea how snow was for you this past month, but in a lot of communities, a lot of managers were tearing out the hair with the snowstorm we had a few weeks ago, because we don't get very many snows, and when you get one that's over 6 inches, I mean, you really do wish somebody plowed the streets, right? But can you afford to plow everybody's street every time it snows and keep your very small crew on for that long? And every snowstorm's a little different, but it costs a lot of money to have those kind of reserves, that kind of equipment, all that overtime. And most snows in Kansas, they get clear. I mean, just have the sun come out for a minute. It'll be all gone in a couple days, that kind of thing. So it's that piece about, can we afford to do this for everybody? And I think looking at that gets you through some of the legacy of ethics. And people say, well, what do you mean ethics? Well, you know it when you see it. I mean, if you're doing things for one that you're not willing to do for everybody, and honestly, if you tell people that, yeah, I understand why you are mad about this, but we cannot afford to do this for everybody, and we're not going to do it for just one because you're loud and you're intimidating us, that kind of thing. So criticism, then the next slide. I mean, dealing with criticism is a very difficult part of the job. And number one, there's going to be rumors. I say, listen, heads up, try not to contribute to the rumor mill. But when you hear them, try to do what you can to squelch them, to give the correct information to that person who says it, or back to City Hall to say, hey, people are out here saying this. Can we do something about that? Can we get the word out in other positive ways to help squelch those rumors, especially when you know they're false? Sometimes rumors can be helpful. I mean, they help you know what people are thinking, and maybe have misinterpreted something that the city's message that you thought was one way, but people are taking it a different way. But you have to deal with them head on. You can't just let them fester out there. Um, Always thinking about the future, and that's easier said than done. I get it, but there's so many times we want to reflect on, well, back in my day, or I remember when, or I ran for council because, you know what, we fixed that. Let's move on. Let's be positive. And we talked about that a while ago. When it comes to becoming a thriving community, it's all about the buzz. Is your buzz that everybody hates to live here and it's a community of last resort? And they don't really want to live here, but they're stuck here, or we can't have nice things because we don't have money or leadership or whatever? Or is it we like living here and we want our kids to be happy here, and we have a good school and we have good businesses here, and we can be one of those places that's going to get new housing and our older neighborhoods repaired and in better condition. You know what I mean? It's all about the buzz. So sometimes if we just focus on the future and just thinking about leaving things better, if we left it better than what we found it. Um, and certainly dealing with criticism, one way to do that is to learn about the city's history, the details of operations and financing and the ordinances and what's what, because a lot of times what you hear that out there that's negative isn't true. But you don't know that, and they don't know that because you don't know all the details of the past and how things have been done. So it's a constant learning process. And again, focusing on what your key policy issues are. What are the key drivers that could make the community better? Because you can't do everything. You have a small staff, they can't do everything. You can come up with lots of ideas. The hardest part for you is narrowing in on, okay, let's focus on this one thing for the next 6 months, and then that will make a difference in our community. If we get scattered and work on 5 things and do them all kind of halfway, may not help. So in summary, I would just say that we've covered a lot tonight on roles and duties, and certainly suggested some ideas for conducting business in best way possible. I would just end by asking you all that key question. Is there anything that you have a takeaway from tonight? Any surprises? Any challenges? New questions? Whatever. Something you expected to hear tonight that you haven't heard and you're still wondering about.
One thing I heard that I really liked was transparency. I don't think we hear it enough.
Okay.
I don't think it's understood. I don't know how to phrase it, but
No, it's great. And I totally believe that that's a huge part of your role, is to constantly remind the staff of that as well. Because like I said, sometimes public sector staff, we're so like, get the job done best way possible. We're down here in the weeds. So when you can say, well, what have we told the public? How have we talked about this in public? It's like, oh, yeah, we should talk about this now. We should tell people. We should communicate this. And sometimes you need to help with that, because the staff is like, they're getting the thing fixed or doing the due project. They're not thinking about taking the photo and posting it online and putting it in the newsletter. And thank you for that. Transparency is huge, because it's the only way to get people to trust City Hall and want to be a part of it. Thank you, Kip.
Kathy, one thing you touched on early on, and that was a vision. But I think in going along with that, how important do you feel it is for the council to have a mission statement?
Mm, mm.
What's your take on that?
Well, I don't know what you have now, but I've seen the gamut. Some communities will have a mission statement and a vision statement and some goals and some values. I would say do what works for you. You know, you need something. You need that sort of North Star guide of, hey, this is what we're about. I'm just looking at the sign behind your head there, Mayor, just loving the small town life. I mean, just having a little slogan like that helps people kind of focus on, oh, what are we celebrating here? We're not apologizing because we're a small town.
Right.
We're proud of it. You know, so sometimes a mission statement or a vision statement can just get people to circle around a shared vision for their community. So if you have a tagline like that, you may not necessarily need a vision statement because you're saying this is what we're proud of. But mission wise, sometimes it's good for the staff to have something that they've contributed to developing. Okay, what's our mission here? You know, it may be obvious to some, and they said, well, we don't need that. But I'll be real honest with you. I worked with a community recently in the past couple weeks, and they had an old mission statement. It's kind of older, but it was short, so that was good. It needs to be short. But they said, what was the word they used? Providing exceptional public services. And some of the staff, the department heads, they were like, well, I mean, I got to be honest with you, public works guy, my department is not funded to do exceptional public services. We're doing okay. We're doing adequate. This community cannot afford exceptional. And so don't put that out there and then expect that, because we're going to bring you budget requests and then you'd have to raise taxes to do all these fancy new things that would be exceptional. So let's just kind of moderate and say we want quality public services, but everything's really expensive. So we have to choose and we can't have everything. And I just thought that was very enlightened of them. You know, don't put a statement out there that is so aspirational, it's unrealistic. And then people kind of get depressed because it's like, well, we can't do that. And this is just a sham that we're putting these fancy words on something. So I'm a real practical person. I'll be honest with you. I think the goals are the most important thing. What do we want to do? What do we need to do? And what are we going to rally around to make it happen? Because we can't have everything. So let's focus in on the things that are critical for our community and that we all know where we stand on this. Who's going to help with that? With the small staff, everybody helps in their own way, right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I also like the part when you say that him and I talk about a subject matter and a couple of days later he talks to another council member. That's a no-no. I didn't know that.
Okay.
And I'm glad you told me that.
Okay. Well, I tell you, this briefing tonight didn't go into all the open record, open meetings, but I think Sarah's working on getting some more of that to you because, you know, it's boring stuff, but it's stuff that if you don't know it, you need to know it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sometimes there are League of Municipality sessions you can go to, or people you can have come in and do that kind of thing. It's just very helpful because I'll be honest with you, when people make mistakes sitting in your seat, they're honest mistakes. Usually you didn't realize you were doing it wrong. But the last couple of years, I will tell you, there have been some really embarrassing stories. And when these things get reported and investigated by the attorneys and the state level people, and they find you guilty, they will fine you up to $500 individually. The city cannot pay those fines. You as individuals are responsible. And the attorney general that we have has been doing that, making people pay the fines. And in the past, that hasn't really been that, you know, strict, but it is. He's trying to wake people up to realize you really do have to follow these laws. And so they're not hard to learn, but I think if, you know, Sarah, if you were able to like get someone to come in and do a little bit of open meetings, open records, just so we're all clear on what we need to do on that is probably a good idea.
We just had that discussion the other day.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good. You're on top of it.
Getting there.
Any of the candidates have any questions or Did
No,
you-
I just want to say thank you for coming and explaining all of this. You are a very proficient speaker.
Oh, well, thank you very
I
much. Made my
had
day.
zero questions because I had some kind of idea what goes into council,
Yeah.
being a council member but very informative, very thorough.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, it's been a pleasure for me to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you all very
Thank you
much.
much.
You've been a very good audience to work with, and I appreciate your service. I really do. I have high hopes for your community. Anything I can do to help, let me know.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening.
Yes.